benefits are all just a matter of perspective. Yeah. Yeah. Hi, I'm Lou and this is Lily Rowe. Thanks for joining us in this video where we'll be exploring some of the benefits of forest school. So there are a number of pieces of research and various studies on forest school out there. Some have been done by proper university academics, others have been done just by practitioners themselves as kind of action, as action research. However, many of these studies have been done with small groups, small sample sizes, or over a very short space of time. So there is a bit of a limiting factor around forest school research in the fact that, to my knowledge, there isn't any really robust longitudinal study with a large sample size about what happens when people take part in forest school. So there's a bit of a gap there, presumably because of funding and things. So this video isn't about the academic research, this is more about what I've noticed the benefits to be through my own experience of forest school and through talking to people who've been participating in forest school. Although there are anecdotal evidences that kind of say similar things to some of the studies that are out there. So I will put some links to research that seems to be relevant to what we're talking about down in the comment sections below so that you can see some of the other evidence out there. What I've noticed over the years is that forest school has ripple effects. So there are a number of different benefits depending on the perception of where you're connected to it. So I'm going to break down this video in terms of the different audiences that forest school might have benefits for. So the way I see it, there are 5 of them. So there are benefits to the actual participants of a forest school programme. There are benefits to the school or early years setting or organisation that the group come from. There are benefits to families, the families of the participants. There are benefits to nature and conservation, and then there are benefits to the wider world and our general society. So we're going to take a look at each of those 5 in turn. So firstly, let's explore the benefits to the learners or the participants themselves at forest school. For me, the biggest thing that I've noticed about how forest school benefits people is the sense of empowerment that it brings. It can be truly transformative to people. And I believe that this sense of empowerment comes from a really strong sense of knowing oneself. And the reason forest school is good at doing that is because it's in nature, where nature is always authentic. It's a space of non-judgment. It's a space where nothing's pretending to be anything else. A tree is a tree, and it's always been a tree, and it's always going to be a tree until it moves on into another life. And because of that, people can find themselves very easily. They can consider the bigger picture of things and their place amongst it. I think forest school is also very good at this because it's play-based or learner-centred, if you like. And therefore, we support the individual to find their own unique collection of gifts that they bring to the world. And everybody is equally valued, but recognised as being different and unique to each other. And that's truly celebrated. And because this diversity is celebrated, people feel secure about themselves. They don't worry about what other people might think of them, and therefore can truly step into their power. There's a buzzard calling above me, which is beautiful, and I hope he's in agreement with my message. Yeah, the buzzard's calling. what was I saying? Play-based, forest school's play-based. I've got to listen to the buzzard, sorry. Oh, now there's alarm calling in the bushes. What's happening? We just had this amazing encounter with a jay, so I've completely lost my thread of talk. But what were we saying? What were we saying, Babs? About the benefits of forest school and the play. Yes. So sometimes forest school is often used as an intervention with children or young people or even adults who perhaps have been struggling in mainstream settings. So it can be often used as an intervention. And I think that this transformative, empowering potential of forest school is one of the reasons why it's really good at doing that. Because it's non-judgmental and it helps people find a sense of themselves and maybe even a sense of purpose. And I believe in this way it has very therapeutic qualities. So there is an awful lot of research out there coming out at the moment to do with like ecotherapies and the benefits of spending time in nature, things like forest bathing, other lovely things that happen in natural spaces. And this all shows how our nervous system, our bodies and our minds are designed to be out here. After all, you know, this is where we evolved, this is where we belong, this is our true home. It's only the last 100 years or so that we've come indoors, really. So, of course, we're completely designed to be out here in this space, and our nervous system remembers it, even if perhaps our modern day minds have become busy with other things. And therefore, our bodies respond to it when we're out here. So things like the colour green and physically moving helps reduce cortisol levels in the brain, which cortisol is a stress hormone. So we naturally feel more relaxed and calm. The fact that there's more oxygen out here, very beneficial for brain development, physical health, of course. The fact that there is different terrain, different obstacles to navigate. There's no uniform paths in nature or uniform trees to climb. There's different risks, there's different challenges, physical ones that we have to navigate, like this muddy puddle that I'm just walking through. And that helps our bodies develop and grow, and we gain skills in all sorts of different ways. So this is a therapeutic space. It's a natural, homely, secure space. Well, at least if facilitated supportively. Some people, of course, are very worried about coming out into a natural space too, which is why we as forest school leaders help scaffold people so that they feel secure out here. To give you some first-hand examples of why I think this is the case, is I've had more than one forest school programme where, when working with children that perhaps suffer from emotional behavioural difficulties in the classroom, when they've had an incident inside or at lunchtime or something, if they run off, if they're runners and they disappear, we've often found them in the forest school space because it was on site rather than off site. And that's where we will find them, because they know that that's a safe, secure space. They feel comfortable there. They feel connected there. So, of course, it's a place where they can be. So if that's integrated into a school or a setting situation, then you could use that as part of coping mechanisms, that knowledge that if that's where that young person feels safe, then that's perhaps a really good place to have as a a calm down spot, for example, or at least it's a secure spot that you know that they're not going to jump the fence and run off, down the street. So I think that sense of security shouldn't be underestimated. That creates a really strong foundation for people to grow and flourish and become their true self in the world. One of the Forest School principles is also that Forest School supports holistic development. So I think this is worth pulling out as an important benefit to participants of Forest Schools, that it is very holistic in its approach. It can support the whole person in terms of their growth and development. So often in mainstream education, there can be a hierarchy of subjects or of things that are of importance. So stereotypically, you'll find things like literacy and numeracy at the top of that hierarchy, and things like the arts at the bottom of the hierarchy. Whereas a human's development doesn't really work in terms of hierarchy. We have different elements of self, but they're all parts of a greater whole. So, our physical development is just as important as our cognitive development, which is just as important as our spiritual development, which is just as important as our emotional development, which is just as important as our social development, and that's just as important as our linguistic development, and so on and so forth. We are this complex web of being, and Forest School, because we're in nature, which is the ultimate in holism, if you like, you can't get much bigger than nature, and of course we are all inherently linked to it. We are nature, and we see that holism in everything out here. We can see all the connections that sustain us out here, and likewise we can see how we sustain other things as well. So it's a place of connection, a place to grow those webs of connection. And because Forest School is learner-centred, it also gives us the chance as Forest School leaders to observe learners and notice whether there are any gaps, for example, in a person's development. So perhaps we notice that one particular learner might lack some of the social development that his or her peers has. Perhaps they haven't had much experience of play, and that's impacted on that social development. Perhaps another learner might have gaps in their physical development. Perhaps they've never been allowed to explore out here on that uneven ground and in those muddy puddles or climb those trees, and therefore that's a new area for them to experience. Perhaps another learner might lack purpose or direction or understanding their place in space. So that might be their spiritual development that's been not nurtured so far. So at Forest School we can see people for who they are and notice if there are any gaps, and then just gently support those to be developed. Recognising that there is no hierarchy, not one thing's better than the other, everything's equally valuable, but just help bringing out some of those elements through being out here non-judgmentally, experiencing the world. I have here some direct quotes from learners who participated in a Forest School programme. So here's the words direct from the horse's mouth, as it were. My favourite part was the way we could be free to do things independently. It can help us keep in balance with indoor learning and outdoor learning. You learn a lot about nature and it helps you in the future. I learnt how to be trusted without any of the teachers knowing what we were doing. It's a feeling you just can't put into words. So next, looking at the benefits to early years settings or schools that the groups might be coming from. So there are a variety of different benefits as I see them, but firstly, Forest School is an environment that is conducive to learning and development. it might look different to a classroom environment, but what's actually happening here to our physiology, to our brains fundamentally, is making us receptive and curious, which are inherent attitudes for learning. We've all got an innate curiosity about the world around us. I think sometimes, in fact, mainstream education can actually disrupt that, unfortunately. But being out here in nature, where it's always changing, there's always something going on, there's always something to find out, there's always something to discover, that has got to be the fundamentals for learning and development and growth. So that is very core, should be a benefit to schools and early years settings. You could take that further and map it to curriculums if you wanted to, and unfortunately that's sometimes a necessity if you are working in a mainstream school or early years setting. Now, because Forest School has come from Scandinavian early years practice, it perhaps most neatly fits with the early years foundation stage here in the UK, and there are, within that document, you've got unique child, enabling environments, positive relationships, and learning and development. And so from my perspective, Forest School meets all four of those things. You know, unique child. Yes, we recognise that every learner is a unique collection of skills, of strengths, of weaknesses, of personalities, and that's celebrated. Enabling environments. Well, you don't get much more enabling out here than nature. As I said earlier, this is where we're designed to be. It's where our nervous system recognises. It's where we can reach our full potential. Positive relationships. Then Forest School is all about positive relationships. It's how we do the work that we do. It's how we support people build their self-esteem. It's relationships not just with the adults in the group, but with the group themselves, between themselves, and also the relationship between the learners and the site as well, the natural space too. It's all about relationships. And then finally, learning and development. Well, as I said earlier, this is the most natural place for learning and development. It's a place of curiosity and discovery. So it dovetails beautifully into the early years foundation stage. And just a personal anecdote, when I was teaching in a mainstream school, I did pretty much 90% of my early years foundation stage profile observations out at Forest School rather than in the classroom. So it definitely can support a curriculum if that's what it needs to be, still maintaining its play-based approach though. I didn't do outdoor lessons at Forest School. I did Forest School at Forest School and then just used the observations that I gained through those child-led experiences. If you're working with older learners and you're looking at national curriculum, then there are still links if you look creatively at it. So, the personal, social and health education, the PSHE elements, that thing about we are forming a community out here, a non-judgmental community. We're working together. Thinking about them elements of the science curriculum, of course, that take place out here. We're fundamentally in nature, looking at natural things out here. Even things like thinking skills, critical thinking, problem solving, all that happens naturally out here. Creativity happens naturally out here. Nature has always inspired the great artists, the great linguists of our times, writers, poets, artists, quite often are inspired by nature. So it's useful in all senses of the word. It can be used to inspire all areas of the curriculum. Another thing in terms of schools and early years settings is that I've noticed it can increase attendance. So if you've got learners that again perhaps have got particular needs and because of that might find it difficult to attend on a regular basis, I've noticed that when you start running Forest School, they'll always turn up on Forest School Day. So it can increase participation and attendance, which for some learners, that's where you've got to start, because if they're not present at your organisation, then of course you're not going to have any effect on them. So having something where they want to participate in, and again coming back to that sense of security and feeling safe to be out there with you, is absolutely fundamental to any programme that you're running. In terms of inclusion and special educational needs, it also provides benefits in terms of improving relationships between staff and learners. I've definitely seen that happen several times within Forest School, and I think that's because nature is a leveller. People see each other for who they are as human beings rather than the labels of the learner with ADHD or the teaching assistant. And so you can actually create much more nurturing relationships through it. You could also, if you're working with secondary age group, link it to vocational qualifications as well. And so if you've got learners who perhaps aren't being put forward for mainstream qualifications, it gives them opportunities and potentially career pathways. So again, I have a first-hand example of that with a young man that I used to work with at Forest School when he was at high school. He had dyslexia, and so was part of a Forest School programme that I was involved with, and through that he gained experience, and more importantly he gained an interest and a direction that he felt that he wanted to work in an outdoor nature-based type of job, and then through that went for work experience at a local field study centre, but as a groundsman, and eventually he got paid employment and went and did his various sort of certificates, like chainsaw certificates and things like that. So through his experience of Forest School, it created a pathway to his future adult profession. So there definitely are career pathways as well coming from Forest School. Here are some first-hand example quotes from teachers who have had children participate in Forest School programmes. So Forest School is engaging, creative and free. Children are given the time they need to build confidence and learn for themselves. Forest School is a vital part of children's development because so many children have no outdoor experience. They have lost touch with all things to do with nature and don't know about the insects or trees and plants. The children have grown in confidence in lots of ways, especially language. They are less anxious and more excited about school and learning. And this quote's directly from an Ofsted report. Pupils love their school and all talk with great enthusiasm about the impact of Forest School on their well-being. So then moving on to the benefits to families of the participants. So what I've noticed is as a child or a young person goes to Forest School on a regular basis, they start feeling more comfortable out here and they start wanting to be out here. And so what happens when they go back home is they perhaps start playing outside more if they've got their own gardens, or perhaps they start asking their parents whether they can go to the country park or to the woodlands with them. And so the ripple effects are felt by the whole family through the child wanting to engage with nature. So it's kind of a bit of like a reverse thing where the children perhaps are leading the adults sometimes in some families, which is wonderful, because then all those benefits that the participants feel at Forest School, like the well-being, that sense of security, that familiarity, is then being shared by the whole family, and they have shared experiences out here, which, as well as all those well-being benefits, are also going to strengthen those relationships between family as a family unit. And of course, nature is always freely available to us. We don't have to buy expensive equipment, we don't have to spend money to go places, we can just head out to the woods. It should be accessible for all families to be out here. It's worth mentioning that also some forest school programs specifically, purposefully work with families together because their intention is perhaps to strengthen those bonds of family, or particularly if there are families that are struggling, for example, they're using nature as a place to hold the space for those families and let its therapeutic magic work. Here are some quotes from parents.
It has been lovely watching her confidence grow. It's safe to say we have all learnt that it's okay to get muddy, something I've never liked doing before. On weekends we now go to our local park and I'm happy to let him go off and explore a lot more. Now when he comes home from school, he's excited to tell me about the games he's played and what he's discovered at Forest School.
Then there's benefits to wild spaces or nature itself. And so the way I see Forest School doing this is threefold. Firstly, it helps reconnect people to nature. So being out here throughout the year on a regular basis, people start noticing things. They notice seasonal changes. They take interest in that particular tree because that's the one they climb, or they take notice in that particular plant because they've eaten it and cooked a recipe using it. So it's a way of people feeling strong connection to nature, which means ultimately they will start caring for it, because you can only care for that you know and love. So it has to start with the knowing and the loving before you can care for something. So I see reconnecting people to nature as the root of the conservation movement, because why should you worry about the plight of the condor if you've never seen a wren? I think somebody famous might have said that. I can't remember who. But, you know, it is that connecting with what's on your doorstep will help you then care for the wider world. The next thing that Forest School does in terms of benefits to out here is it gives people skills and knowledge about the natural world. So through being here, we start to learn the names of the species around us. We might pick up skills like how to coppice hazel, for example, or how to lay a hedge, or how to plant a tree. And those skills could be useful to us in terms of moving forward and helping maybe conservation groups. And then that ties in with the third one, which is actually the site management of the actual Forest School space. So many forest schools might get involved with caring and tending the land that they're working on. So that could be through coppicing, it could be through helping maintain paths for visitors, or providing interpretation about different species that are very special to that site. There's all sorts of different ways that learners can get involved with forestry. So then lastly, there's the benefits to the wider society. Hopefully many of you have come across Richard Louve's book, Last Child in the Woods, Saving Our Children from Nature Deficit Disorder. If you haven't, it's worth looking that one up. It explains a lot about the world, I suppose, that we live in now and that our children grow up in, and how there seems to be a crisis in many areas, such as mental health and also physical health. You know, there's a rise in depression, anxiety disorders, there's a rise in childhood obesity, there's a rise in sort of labels like ADHD and other kind of behavioural patterns. There seems to be a decrease in social skills, perhaps, and there's a variety of things happening out there to the people in our society, and particularly our young people. And all of these things have costs associated with them. If you consider the NHS and our education system and our police force. And now in that book, Richard Louve suggests that one of the factors that influences these issues is the lack of appropriate outdoor play experiences in nature. And so if that theory is correct, and that is a contributing factor to some of these things like mental health, like the physical health thing, then that means things like Forest School, which is all about play in nature, can contribute to reducing those issues in our society, and hence saving money potentially, which is always a useful tack to go down if you're looking for funding for Forest School, because we have got a preventative element to it in terms of how it supports people as an intervention to those things. So if you look at it big picture, Forest School really could change the world. It could be transformative. You know, after all change starts with the individual change. So if we're helping individuals, then we're helping the wider world. Yeah, the benefits ripple through us, and who knows where they will end up. So there you have some of the benefits that I've seen firsthand at our Forest School programmes. Have you seen others? Do let me know in the comment section below. We would love to hear from you. If you've enjoyed this video, do give us a thumbs up and consider subscribing to our channel so you can join us in the woods again next time. And thanks for watching. The benefits of Forest School can be far-reaching: self-esteem, resilience and confidence teaching. Out here, things develop naturally, so let's all head out to the trees.